Hi everyone, it's Eric from Vantage IT. Today's session is oriented more towards the technically curious or the technically inclined who may be interested in finding out about how virtual machines can be set up and run in Windows 10. For those who have heard about virtual machines but really don't understand the concept, what a virtual machine is a computer that's implemented in software. It allows you to it allows you to run an operating system on top of another operating system that's running on hardware. So for example, what you're looking at here is a Windows 10 virtual machine, which is basically a software computer running on top of a Windows 10 system running on a hardware computer. It looks exactly like Windows 10, it behaves exactly like Windows 10. Everything you can do in Windows 10, you can do with a Windows 10 virtual machine. You can install different operating systems on a virtual machine. It doesn't have to be Windows 10. It could be any distribution of Linux that's compatible with the virtual machine environment. It could be another Windows 10 virtual machine that is part of the Insider Preview program. So for example, if you were a preview program member and wanted to install a more unstable version of the system to play with it, you might want to do it in a virtual machine so that you're not risking your underlying operating system and the reliability of the system that you use in your day-to-day work. So before I dive into showing you quickly how to set up Windows 10 to run virtual machines, I'm just going to give you an idea of one of the benefits of a virtual machine. This virtual machine is actually installed, the disk that it's running on is actually installed on an SSD on my system. So that means that it's going to be relatively quick. And one of the benefits is performance. So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to shut down and restart this virtual machine. You'll see how long it takes. Bear with me. I'm going to stay quiet while it's actually doing the restart because it's going to be a relatively short amount of time. And the virtual machine is back up. That did not take long at all. Imagine if you had rebooted your hardware machine, even with an SSD, it would have taken significantly longer. So I'm just going to log back in here to prove to you that it is a legitimate virtual machine. Helps if I type the correct password. So there we go. We're back up and back in business. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to install HyperV in Windows 10. HyperV is what's called the hypervisor, the thing that actually enables virtual machines to be run on Windows 10. The editions of Windows 10 that you can install HyperV on are Windows 10 Professional and Windows 10 Enterprise. Also, if you're running Windows 8, 8.1 Professional or Enterprise, you can also install Hyper-V on those. So here we go. I'm just going to minimize this window, which is the virtual machine, and this will take me back to the real machine. This is now running on my physical machine. We'll get to the Hyper-V manager in a few minutes. This is the actual environment in which you would create your virtual machines and manage them. To be able to run virtual machines on Windows 10, you do have to install Hyper-V. Now, I've already got it installed. In order to install it, you have to go to Control Panel. And from Control Panel, you go to Programs and Features. And in Programs and Features, on the left-hand side here, you select Turn Windows Features on or off. You'll notice here that I have Hyper-V already selected. On your system, if it's a clean install, Hyper-V won't be selected. So what you'll do is you'll check it and then you'll click OK. It'll go through the process of installing Hyper-V. You'll want to have everything installed. Probably at some point down the road, you're going to want to experiment with some of the PowerShell scripting and so on if you're a real keener. So basically, just make sure everything is checked off. I'm not going to show you how the installation process works. It'll just go off and it'll give you all the prompts and everything you need to make it happen. So I'll cancel out of there. I'll come back over to the Hyper-V manager, which I'm actually going to shut down. So even though I've shut down the Hyper-V manager, which is for managing the virtual machines, the virtual machine is still running. It's down here. So I can click on it and I can bring it back and maximize it. Some of the things you can do with the Hyper-V manager, which I'm going to launch by clicking on the Start menu and then just typing Hyper-V, and it brings up Hyper-V manager. You can import virtual machines. So for example, if you've got demo machines that a vendor is wanting you to run, you can import that virtual machine. If you've got virtual machines that have been created by your IT department that you want to run, you would import those. You can also create your own virtual machines on one system, export them, and then import them onto another system, and so on. Under Hyper-V settings, this is where you establish your settings. I'm not going to get into that because it would take probably an hour or two just to go into detail on what all the settings are. The virtual switch manager allows you to define what the network looks like to your virtual machine. The virtual SAN manager is for storage in the event that you have external storage connected to your computer. For example, if you have a NAS, you can configure what elements of the NAS can be used if it uses iSCSI with Hyper-V. You can edit disks. Again, I'm not going to get into that. This is something for you guys to play with. So the rest of the stuff in the top part here, you can play with. Connect allows you to connect to a virtual machine. In the upper left pane, you would have a list of the virtual machines that you've created. You can select a machine and you can connect to it, and then it'll open, in the case of a Windows virtual machine, a remote desktop connection. And in the case of a Linux machine, it'll open a console that you can actually play with. You can edit settings for the virtual machines, including the number of processors that are assigned to them, how much RAM is assigned at startup, whether RAM is dynamic, how much disk space to assign, and so on. Ton of options to set up there. Again, go to the documentation, find out what there is. Then the three commands here: turn off, shut down, save. Save allows you to save the current state of the virtual machine so that when you restart it, it comes back up in exactly the same state it was as when you saved it. So if it's in the middle of doing something, it'll suspend what it's doing and then restart. Pause is very similar, except that what it does is it keeps the virtual machine running. Well, not running, but it keeps it in a state that you can very, very quickly restart it just by clicking on start. Reset resets the machine. Checkpoint is a very interesting thing because what it allows you to do is it allows you to snapshot the state of a virtual machine. So let's say, for example, you have a Windows 10 machine that's running stably, and you want to install an insider release of Windows 10. What you could do is you could take a snapshot of your existing machine. You can then install the insider release. If you discover that the insider release isn't working properly, you can then just quickly revert back to the snapshotted state of your machine. It'll completely restore it back to the state it was in very, very quickly. This is much quicker than the Windows System Restore capability. You can also revert a machine back to a previous snapshotted state. You can move a virtual machine from one disk to another or to a different location on a disk. Export, I had mentioned earlier on that you can import a virtual machine. Export allows you to export an instance of a virtual machine that can be imported. You can also rename a virtual machine. So that, in a nutshell, is the virtual machine environment on Windows 10. Not going to get into a lot more detail than that. You can go off and explore. If you have questions, if you need a hand getting any of this set up, get in touch with Vantage IT. We're subject matter experts on this stuff. Doesn't need to cost you a lot in terms of the consulting services to get you up and running. And once you're up and running, you'll be on your own and be able to actually leverage this great feature of Windows 10. Thank you.